Hello and welcome to another episode of I Fix Old Stuff. In this video, we're going to continue our series in troubleshooting the 1961 Wurlitzer 2504 Jukebox. Let's get started. In the previous video in this series, I replaced the power cord on the jukebox and actually got it to start up. On power up, it immediately fired in a 45 and began playing. And that's awesome. However, we would only play this one song over and over. I discussed in the video that perhaps the selection had been entered into the memory several times. However, this is actually not possible with this kind of primitive memory. And I realized this about 5 minutes after posting that last video. A YouTube viewer confirmed this in the comments. Thanks, man. Initially, I thought the record was warped. However, the records were actually not loading correctly into the mechanism, which was making the record travel on an angle. This resulted in the sound dropping out on each revolution. As well, as I mentioned in the last video, I could not find the reject switch. As it turns out, the reject switch is on the front of the preamp power amp block, shown here. The silkscreen labeling had just worn off. Once I found this out, it made troubleshooting a lot easier. I brought in my friend who's an absolute genius at mechanical issues. Let's go forward in time and see how the jukebox is actually supposed to work. When selecting a song, one of these pins is pushed up. This is called writing in a selection. Then, this arm turns to find the selection. It should stop at that pin, load the selection, and push the pin back down to take the selection out of memory. However, what was really happening is that the arm would bounce off the pin, then rotate back, and either pick the wrong song or miss a record entirely. What we discovered is that underneath the carousel is a service lever. This disengages the carousel so the operator can change up the records. This switch had been engaged the entire time. However, I find it hard to believe that the manufacturer would design something that allowed the mechanism to actually run in this service mode. We then discovered that there is a switch that is connected to this lever. However, it has actually been cut out of the circuit. More research will be done here, but I believe this switch is supposed to kill the motor when in service mode. The next problem we discovered is that when we were selecting songs, the jukebox would sometimes pick the completely wrong record. This was going to take a bit to figure out, as this was our first time with a Wurlitzer. Both of us own Rockolas, which operate differently when choosing an A or B side. These Rockola jukes actually flip the record over during the loading procedure onto the platter, depending on which side is selected by the customer. On this series of Wurlitzer, however, the records load from the left or the right, depending on what side is selected. After playing around some more, what we discovered was that the records were always only loading from the left side. They would not load from the right side. A quick scan of the switch bank that controls this function found us a broken ground wire. A quick solder job and we were back in business. Except, now, when trying to load a record from the left side, the carousel would actually jam. We guessed that the carousel was not being halted accurately in the correct position for the left arm to load the records onto the platter, and this was jamming the system. However, the right arm would load records consistently. My colleague and I have lots of experience with electromechanical pinball machines, and a common fault is gummed up mechanisms, perhaps from age, incorrect or old lubrication, or dirt buildup. There are two units at the front of this machine called the back stop pawls. These act like ratchets, stopping the carousel in an accurate location for the arms to load a record onto the platter. Upon inspection, these were acting extremely slow, so a quick cleaning with 99% pure isopropyl alcohol was in order. Once cleaned and reinstalled, the juke picked and loaded the correct songs consistently. The next thing to conquer was that the records were not loading correctly onto the spindle. Once the record raises up, the spindle should move forward and fingers reach out and pull the record into position. One finger was being sluggish, causing the records to be loaded on an angle. A quick cleaning and tightening of the screws holding these fingers in place fixed this issue, and records would now load correctly and consistently. So, that's it for this video series on getting the Wurlitzer 2504 jukebox up and running. The last adjustment to be made is getting the needle to hit the record at the right spot when starting. However, we will do this adjustment when the jukebox arrives on location. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.